She is often called the most prolific female serial killer in history, accused of murdering over 600 young women within her castles. She was imprisoned but never given a proper trial, and most of the evidence against her came from testimonies taken under torture. Was she one of the most brutal serial killers in history, or just a woman accused without real proof? It's an interesting case. Anyway, welcome to our channel. This is Start with the Weird, and we are discussing true crime stuff.
Yes.
I'm not really good at speaking at the moment. So we are talking about Elizabeth Bathory today. Have you ever heard of Elizabeth Bathory, Roderick?
Absolutely not. But as I understand, you have even prior to researching for today's episode.
That is correct. So she was a really, really powerful noblewoman compared to when she was alive. Riches and a very powerful husband, and her lands were in strategic points of Hungary and Transylvania and Slovakia. So she was very important, but also apparently she killed 600 young women.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes.
Yes.
Also, there are legends that claim that she was bathing in the blood of her victims because that would keep her young forever. But that's probably just a legend. I
never know how to feel about this stuff, to be honest, because on one hand, right, you do have rich people that kind of go crazy because, I don't know, they get bored. So this story doesn't sound too far-fetched. At the same time, she was a powerful woman, and they did love crying witch on those. So
yes, let's just talk about years before this whole craziness started. So Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 on a family estate in near Bátor, Hungary, into a long line of powerful nobles. Her family's influence stretched across kingdoms. Her uncle would one day become king of Poland. Yet, even with such status, life for a woman in the 16th century was far from easy. Noblewomen in that era had limited freedom because their lives were mostly dictated by family, marriage, alliances, and social expectations, such as arranged marriages, strict codes of behavior, and little control over property or political influence. And this restriction on women's lives would become quite important as the events unfolded. So basically, compared to the women who lived around that era in Central Europe, compared to them, she had quite a lot of power.
as I understood, yeah.
Elizabeth Bathory grew up surrounded by wealth and privilege, raised in the Calvinist Protestant faith of her family. From a young age, she was taught languages, Latin, German, Hungarian, even Greek, opening a window to the wider world beyond her castle walls. Education, wealth, and social rank were hers by birth, yet all of it came with expectations she could never fully escape. So, would you have been a woman around this time?
It's difficult to be a woman during this time. Like, come on.
Yes.
What we're talking about, like, right now we have, like, basically the best out of the worst, I would say. So, would I like to take a step back? Absolutely not.
No.
When you were talking about basically her education, it's daunted on me. Like, why they bothered to teach women Latin, German, Hungarian, and Greek if they only expected them to, I don't know, to run the household and have children? What was the point?
Yes. Someone would tell you who to marry and how to behave. It would be awful. I suppose it's kind of good that she got education, but she was one of the few ones, the exceptions, so to speak.
But what about everyone else? Literally, like, I'm not saying education is wasted. Like, don't get me wrong. Absolutely not. It's never wasted. I just think, that in those like times, basically that was just for education's sake, just to be able to say that, oh, my daughter or my wife, she can do this and this, but like I will never allow her to actually do anything with what she's taught.
Maybe it sort of raised their value.
Yeah, like a trophy,
when
basically.
yeah, when it came to marriage. As a child, Elizabeth suffered from multiple seizures, what people at the time called falling sickness, likely what we know now as epilepsy. Treatment were strange and cruel by modern standards. Rubbing the blood of a healthy person
Ew.
on the lips, or even mixing a bit of skull with blood as the episode ended. I don't
Horrible.
really
Like,
know how to react to that.
yeah, move on like nothing happens.
Yeah, thank God for modern medicine. By the age of 13, before her first marriage, rumors swirled that Elizabeth had given birth to a child, allegedly fathered by a local peasant. The child was said to have been quietly sent away to Wallachia under the care of a trusted woman, paid by the family to ensure secrecy. This story is debated by historians as it appears only in rumors recorded after her death.
Two things I want to point out after you just finished.
Yeah,
First of all, I was very intrigued how to pronounce the word Wallachia because I was Wallachia? What is going
I'm
on? Okay.
I'm hoping that I pronounced it correctly because it's not a
Oh, I
Hungarian
thought you
word.
knew for sure.
No, I was guessing, so I don't even know where place is. Let's have a look.
Like whoever is listening, please put it in the comments because apparently we are not really good at 16th century geography.
It is a historical and geographical region in southern Romania, situated between the southern Carpathians and the Danube River. So I would say it's in Transylvania.
I'll trust you. Like, why not? The other thing I wanted to point out, is that it just slipped my mind. What was it? Oh yeah, like it just made me think how many bastard children are out there, or like how many actually people take their lineage to like all these noblemen and noble ladies only because like they had to dispose of them very quietly.
Are you thinking that you might be a princess secretly?
I wasn't saying that.
Oh, that would be
But
awesome
I was
if I
also not saying that, so
yes, probably a lot of them. I mean, they didn't really have birth control. There is something I want to add here, which I have read about, but it's not really proven. But apparently, because she grew up obviously in a noble family, she witnessed loads of cruelty, as in her parents treating the servants very cruelly and punishing them. And also, she witnessed beheading and hanging. So all of these things, if it's true that she was witnessing them, it probably would have put some influence on her mental health.
so
And
basically it was like Squid Game's medieval edition.
yeah, I mean, if you would witness someone being beheaded when you're like 10 years old, it would probably stick with you for the rest of your life.
Probably. Just a wild guess, but I'd say so.
And she did learn cruelty from her parents, from her family, because apparently it was normal to treat your servants and the peasants cruelly at that time.
One more reason to be thankful not to be born during that time.
Yes, definitely. At just 14 years old, Elizabeth was married to Count Ferenc Nádasdy, a powerful noble from another influential family. Like most marriages among the aristocracy, it was arranged, something decided for her, not by her. The union brought together vast lands across Transylvania and the Kingdom of Hungary, instantly placing her in a position of significant power. As part of the marriage, she was given control over the household at Chejte Castle, a place that would later become central to her story. For a woman in the 16th century, holding this level of authority was rare. So basically, what I said, it was very rare that a woman could hold any sort of household or any, what's the word I'm looking for?
Property?
Land. Property, thank you. Sorry, it's a little bit late and I can't think straight anymore. So it was very rare. So she was an exception. And with her husband, their life together began at Sárvár, and although the marriage was arranged, some accounts suggest it grew into something closer over time. So probably they fell in love eventually. It feels a little bit like that this man, Count Ferenc Nádasdy, was really powerful. She had a lot of land and property, and it feels a
I
little
wonder
bit
if
like...
she felt lucky.
I don't know. I mean, even if you are marrying someone who's rich, but you are sold to them like livestock, kind of.
Absolutely. But like if you look at others, and you're sold and you don't have any power. So like I'm just wondering if she, I don't know, felt any relief or I don't know, sense of control, luck that she ended up better than the majority.
Oh, it's really hard to tell. I find this case super interesting and I also find it super frustrating because we'll never have answers to these questions. I wish we would know more about her because I think she's absolutely fascinating. In 1578, Ferenc became the chief commander of Hungarian forces, leaving frequently to fight against the Ottomans. With him gone, Elizabeth took on even greater responsibility, overseeing finances, maintaining order, and ensuring the safety of the land, which lay dangerously close to conflict zones. Villages nearby had already been attacked, and the threat of invasion was constant. In his absence, the responsibility of protecting everything they owned fell to her. This role usually included responsibility for the Hungarian and Slovak people, providing medical care during the long war. So, yeah, she was the boss, basically.
And they still say that a woman is not capable of leadership.
Yes. I mean, I think she did get the papers eventually, but on papers, obviously, it wasn't her who was in charge, it was her husband.
Of course, it's the story that happens all too often.
Yes. And we are talking about not just like one property. They had castles in Slovakia and in Transylvania and in Hungary. So it was a huge, what's the word I'm looking for? Why can't I remember the word? Not just property, because it was like spread out around Hungary.
Like properties, yeah. What's wrong with the word?
Oh, okay, fine. Let's go with properties. There is a word which I completely forgot. I won't be able to remember it.
Our podcast is turning slowly from a true crime podcast to like our views on feminism and how history treated women unfairly.
I think it's a very important part of this true crime story, so to speak. And what I want to point out here that how she sort of provided medical care to people, not just for soldiers, but also anyone from the surrounding villages, which is going to become really important as the story unfolds. Over the years, Elizabeth gave birth to several children, most of them arriving between the mid-1580s and the late 1590s. Like many noble families of the time, the children were largely raised by governesses, while Elizabeth continued to manage the household and estate. Estate is the word I was looking for.
Oh, okay, yeah. It is the words.
It is the word, yes. She and Ferenc remained married for nearly 3 decades, a long union shaped as much by duty as by distance, with war often keeping him away. But in the early 1600s, his health began to fail. What started as a severe pain in his legs slowly worsened until he was left permanently weakened. In 1604, after 29 years of marriage, Ferenc Nádasdy died. Before his death, he placed his trust in a powerful ally, György Thurzó, appointing him as protector of his family. It was a decision that would later prove far more significant than anyone could have expected. Basically, she did get all the papers. She was the owner of the castles, but she also had this man, György Thurzó, as a guardian, not just for herself, but for the family as well. I would assume because they needed a man to protect them.
Probably, and as I suspect, the story didn't end very well.
Not quite. Although I'm on the fence with this guy, but let's continue. Yes,
okay.
You see why, because it's really hard to tell which side he was on.
Let's see.
But while Elizabeth managed estates, raised children, and held together everything her husband left behind, something else had already begun to take shape in the background. For years, quiet rumors had been circulating, whispers about peasant girls and young servants who went to work at Chejta Castle and were never seen again. At first, these claims were easy to ignore. Elizabeth was a powerful noblewoman, and in the 17th century Hungary, what happened inside a household was rarely questioned. Servants had little protection, and complaints were often dismissed as nothing more than internal matters. But that began to change. So here we go. We got to the twisted part. What do you think?
Before we go in, I'm just thinking, I also don't know how I feel about this phrase. Oh, young servants and peasant girls went into the castle, never to be seen, again. Like, what was even the life expectancy during that time? I don't think it was very high. I'm trying to Google it right
Yes,
now, and they
that's
say,
one thing, yes. And also, we'll get to that point, but she was taking care of people, as in giving medical care. So it could be the case of someone went in for treatment and they had some sort of deadly disease. And obviously, they died in there. We are talking about the age when they would put a healthy person's blood on the lips to heal epilepsy. So I can imagine that most of these cures didn't really work and didn't really heal people. Well, at that point, nobody really cared because they were just peasant and servant girls. And as I said, it wasn't uncommon to treat servants cruelly. Probably no one wanted to get into her business. But
absolutely.
The moment that drew real attention was when the accusations shifted, when it was no longer just servant girls being mentioned, but the daughters of lower-ranking noble families sent to her household for education and allegedly never returning. By the winter of 1609, Elizabeth had opened what was described as a kind of finishing school within her household, often referred to as a gymnasium. I don't know how to pronounce this. I apologize.
Probably
Gymnasium, which was intended for young women. At the same time, word had already begun to spread among the surrounding villages. Peasant families, hearing the rumors, grew reluctant to send their daughters to work at her estate. But among the nobility, the opposite seemed to happen. Despite the whispers, many still chose to trust her, eager for the advantages her household appeared to offer. For many families, it was an opportunity. Sending their daughters there meant status, education, and the chance to move within higher social circles until their daughters didn't return. Allegedly, yes. Also, she was teaching young women to treat the wounded, etc., etc. So again, what happened there, we don't really know. But at the same time, there is the thing that people have disappeared, and they are talking about 600 people, which is quite a big number. So I don't think it's actually true. She was actually...
But it was 600?
No, it wasn't 600. It's allegedly 600. But as we will talk about it later, the witnesses, they were almost all of them were under torture, and they were just saying random numbers. Someone said 200, someone said 600, someone said 300. So it's hard to tell. And she was in the Guinness World Records, a serial killer with most victims, but then that was removed from the world records because no one actually knows what happened or how many people she killed.
I'm glad they cared to fact check.
Yeah, that hasn't happened for hundreds of years. So when these girls didn't return, their families didn't stay silent. Appeals were made directly to King Mátyás, demanding answers, turning quiet rumors into something that could no longer be ignored. Concerns about Elizabeth's actions reached the authorities through Lutheran minister István Magyari, who spoke out both publicly and at the court in Vienna. In 1610, King Mátyás II appointed György Thurzó, so the protector, the devoutly Lutheran Palatine of Hungary, to investigate. By March of that year, Thurzó had tasked two notaries, András Keresztúri and Mózes Ciraki, with gathering evidence, and by October they had collected 52 witness statements, and by 1611 the number had grown to over 300. By the time the investigation began, witnesses described horrors that sent shivers through even the hardest officials. Tamás Nyereggyártó, sworn in at Bakov, recalled a girl in Újhely whose hand and arm had been so badly damaged that the tendons were destroyed. János Kun and his wife Katalin confirmed the injuries, adding that her shoulders had been cut and her right hand completely destroyed. When questioned, the girl reportedly named Elizabeth herself the Lady Widow Nádasdy. These statements were officially recorded and published under the orders of King Mátyás II in 1611. Testimony from one of Elizabeth's alleged attendants, Dorothy Szentes, offered more grim detail. She claimed that Bathory would drive needles into her victim's fingers, saying if it hurts, I'm not going to say the word, then she can pull it out. If the girl removed the needle, the finger would allegedly be cut off. Other witnesses described repeated atrocities across the castles, girls beaten with cudgels, flesh cut from shoulders and buttocks, and parts of the body burned. Some were locked in dungeons and starved for weeks. Red-hot iron scorched arms and abdomens. Knives were plunged into limbs, fingers severed, and victims forced to stand naked in freezing cold, sometimes doused with water until they shivered uncontrollably. These testimonies were horrifying, formed the backbone of the investigation, and painted a picture that would haunt history for centuries.
It's very unsettling.
It is, but it's important to note, however, that most of these testimonies came from servants and local peasants. Many were questioned under torture, common practice at the time, which casts doubt on the reliability of their statements. Yet, despite this, their accounts formed the basis of the investigation and fueled the terrifying legend of Elizabeth Bathory. So, yeah, is it true? Is it not true? If you're being tortured, you would probably say whatever they want to hear.
Of course. Like, first of all, why would it be a common practice? Like, it seems like common logic, it's not very reliable, but at the same time, like, I don't know, the reason why I'm really on the fence about this story, like, first of all, like, two sides have too many things that are very questionable. But also, like, we've seen these things before. Like, have you heard about this woman, Anne Boleyn, that was the Queen of England?
Yes.
Exactly. Beheaded on the counts of, I think, being a witch, I think incest or something like that, because the dude was just tired of her and he wanted a new one. So
Yes.
yeah,
Maybe we can cover her at some point.
although she didn't kill anyone, so I don't know how she fits into our
I mean, it's still an interesting story, I think. It's kind of a crime. I mean, she was beheaded.
well, yeah, the crime was done to her, true.
Anyway, not all testimonies came from tortured servants, though. A small number of men claimed they had witnessed events firsthand, and their statements carried weight because they were not forced. Among them were Jakab Szivasi, Gergely Pásztory, and Benedek Dezső, men who had spent time inside Elizabeth's household. Dezső, who oversaw operations at Csejte Castle, gave some of the most detailed accounts. He described how a young girl was brought before Elizabeth and subjected to repeated torment, cut with a knife, burned, beaten, until she eventually died from her injuries. He also claimed, sorry, my cat is crying in the background.
You cannot hear it?
Or just explaining things, or just talks a lot. He also claimed that victims were denied food and water, left to weaken over time. Bathory recalled a different incident. A young woman was forced to behave like a child for Elizabeth's amusement. When she refused, saying she was already married with a family, the punishment escalated. Szivasi later added that the abuse continued until the woman was killed. There were also testimonies from outside the castle. Martinus Csanádi, a nobleman, described visiting Elizabeth's household to retrieve a relative, only to find her barely able to stand, weakened and in visible pain. Others claimed that daughters of noble families had also fallen victim. These accounts, given without torture, stood apart from the rest, and because of that, they became some of the most difficult to ignore. Yes, so this is like, okay, they weren't tortured, but was it true? Was it not true? It's really hard to tell.
They could have been bribed.
They could have been bribed, yes. And at the same time, it's a lot of people, a lot of girls who disappeared and got killed. And even if there was a disease, even if they died of, freezing or malnourishment or anything like that, or childbirth or anything, as you said, the life expectancy was really short at that point. It's still a lot of people dying and disappearing that are related to her on some level.
I don't know. Like, yes and no, it's too complicated, to be honest.
I'm not convinced either, but there are things you cannot ignore at the same time. But again, we will never know. Anyway, and now the turning point. From the 1980s, some historians started looking at the case again, and not everyone was convinced. The argument is pretty simple. By the time she was accused, Bathory wasn't just a widow sitting in a castle. She controlled a huge amount of land and wealth, more than most people around her. That alone made her politically important. And at the same time, Hungary was a mess. There were wars with the Ottomans, tension between Protestants and Catholics, and the Habsburgs in Vienna were trying to tighten their grip on power. Bathory was a Calvinist, which didn't exactly put her on good terms with the Catholic court. Then there's her family. Her nephew, Gábor Báthory, was ruling in Transylvania and pushing against Habsburg control with Ottoman support behind him, so he was seen as a real threat to King Mátyás. So obviously the king wasn't happy with her family already. And Bathory herself, she controlled land and fortresses that could have actually mattered if things escalated. So her estates, her estates were in locations that was important when they looked at the war, basically.
The strategic places.
Strategic places. So when you look at it like that, the question becomes, was this really about crimes, or was it about removing someone who had too much power, especially a woman? And if that's not enough, King Mátyás, who had ordered the investigation, also owed her a significant debt, one that was never repaid. So I googled this.
You could see the smile on my face right now, like, I knew it.
Yeah, so the crown basically owed her a lot of money. And so this is where it gets funky. Was she really guilty, or all of this was just a lot of bullshit, so to speak?
Okay, but so far, what do you think?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Let's hear the whole story and then we will make up our minds or not. The legal side of Bathory's case was messy. King Mátyás wanted her punished harshly, partly because if she were executed, her lands would go to the crown and his debts would be wiped out. By January 1611, he was frustrated that the case wasn't moving fast enough. He wrote to Count György Thurzó, who was in charge of the investigation, telling him Báthory needed to be questioned at Castle Csejte and justice had to be done. Thurzó, however, didn't want to publicly disgrace the Báthory family and handled her arrest carefully. Even her son-in-law, Miklós Zrínyi, thanked Thurzó for the way he treated her. So there he is, this György Thurzó, who is leading the investigation, yet he doesn't want to execute her and treating her as a person, basically. And that's interesting because according to historians, he had his own agenda. So basically the investigation into her case, into her crimes was very complicated. King Mátyás, a Catholic, was frustrated that the case wasn't moving quickly. He stood to gain from her death because her lands would go to the crown. as I told before, and he wouldn't have to pay that money back. At the same time, the Lutheran minister István Magyari had been raising concerns about the girls disappearing and being mistreated at her estate. So one of them wanted her executed for obvious reasons, and the other one was actually concerned about the victims. So this is why it's a little bit more complicated than anyone would expect. Now, both of these pressures pushed Count György Thurzó, also a Lutheran, so he has the same religion as the Lutheran minister,
but not the same religion as Bathory. So couldn't it be also like some kind of religious motivation?
Maybe. I don't think it has a lot to do with her religion, but so both of these pressures pushed Count György Thurzó, also a Lutheran, to lead the inquiry. Religion wasn't the main cause. Bathory's family was a Calvinist, but the fact that the king, the minister, and the investigator were from different faiths shows just how tangled the politics and social pressures were around her case. So it wasn't the main cause, but obviously it played an important role, and they probably used religion as an excuse, as it's always used as an excuse for committing crimes. Also, Thurzó had his own reasons for wanting Bathory caught. He was close to the king and had political ambitions. Thurzó reported that he found numerous dead and dying girls when he entered the castle, but some historians argue he exaggerated what he found there. Many of the sick and injured girls could have been there for normal medical care. After all, female landowners were responsible for looking after their tenants, especially women. So again, he is a Lutheran, but he's also close to the crown, and the crown is Catholic.
He needs all of those favors.
So he kind of under a lot of pressure from all sides, I think, but he's also wants
and yet
to.
He didn't. He wasn't in a hurry.
I mean, it did go down quite quick. It was about 2 years or 1 year when they caught her. But the investigation took a long time, I think. I mean, going through all of those witnesses, 300 witnesses, that's a lot of people to question.
True. And torture.
And torture, yes, not to mention that. On New Year's Eve, 1610, Elizabeth Bathory's life changed forever. György Thurzó arrived at Csejte Castle unannounced, carrying the weight of the crown behind him. With him were orders to arrest Elizabeth and 4 of her servants. Dorottya Szentés, Ilona Jó, Katarina Benicska, and János Újvári, also known as Ibis. Thurzó's letter to his wife later claimed that one girl was already dead in the castle and another, barely alive, was found inside. That girl recovered, but she never testified at the trials.
About the servants, imagine, again, we're talking hypothetically here because we don't really know what happened to her, right? Imagine if Elizabeth Bathory was really innocent, right? And all of this was politically orchestrated and financially motivated for whatever other reasons. And imagine being her servants who just, went down for nothing. Like they didn't even hold that power, but they just got caught up in that. That must really, really feel, let's say, unpleasant.
They needed probably a scapegoat, and these 4 people were there close enough to her but not holding any power, yes. So it sucks. So, contrary to the dramatic stories you probably heard, Elizabeth wasn't caught in the middle of torturing anyone. She was having dinner. Thurzó had initially told villagers and guests that she had been caught red-handed, but in reality her arrest came before any victims were discovered or presented. It's likely that the covered in blood image was just an embellishment added later by storytellers. That night, Elizabeth and her accomplices were taken into custody. In a long conversation afterward, she tried to shift the blame, accusing 2 reverends and a pastor of causing her arrest. When asked why she had not stopped the tortures, she admitted plainly, "I did it because even I myself was afraid of them." This confession was made voluntarily, no torture involved. The question of what to do with her next wasn't simple. Thurzo consulted with her son Paul and two of her sons-in-law, Nicola and George. The family, which held power in Transylvania, wanted to protect the Bathory estates from being seized by the crown in a public scandal. At first, they considered sending Elizabeth to a nunnery, but as the rumors of her crimes spread, they decided on strict house arrest instead, her world of luxury reduced to the walls of her own castle. So basically, the king didn't have to pay the money back to her, but he also didn't get her estate by the sound of it.
Oh, you lose some, you win some.
Yeah. So if it's true that she sort of tried to, I don't know, I mean, her confession is a little bit weird, I think.
I don't really even understand what it means, truly. Like, it's very ambiguous and vague. Like,
So she did the tortures because even I myself was afraid of them. She might be talking about those four of her accomplices, but
that they were pressuring her?
maybe, but then, I mean, she was powerful enough not to be scared of four peasants, I think. So it's a little bit weird. I don't really.
But are we even sure that she said it? But at the same time, I'm thinking that if they wanted to fabricate her confession and, to use it as evidence, they could have used something less doubtful and ambiguous.
Yes, but I still don't really understand afraid of them because she's talking about the two reverends and a pastor. Maybe she was talking about them? Anyone who knows the answer, leave it in the comments, I guess. After Elizabeth Bathory's arrest, the courts moved quickly. Two trials were held in early January 1611, the first on the 2nd and the second on the 7th. 17 witnesses appeared at the first trial, including the four servants who had been arrested with her. Unlike Elizabeth, these servants had been tortured beforehand. Under the pressure, they confessed to following her orders. Their punishments were brutal. Ilona Jó and Dorottya Szentes had their fingers torn out with red-hot pincers before being burned alive. Jesus Christ. János Újvári, believed to be less culpable because of his youth, and he was beheaded and then burned alongside them. Another servant, Erzsi Majarova, who had initially escaped, was later captured and burned alive. Katarina Beniczka, however, was spared execution and sentenced to life, as evidence showed she had been abused by the others. So yeah,
That's wild.
Yeah, they died.
Why would you behead a person if you want to burn them after, though? That looks personal.
Interesting. Maybe just to get rid of the body.
Everyone else was just burned. He, though, was beheaded and then burned.
I mean, their fingers were torn out before, so I don't know.
Don't remind me. I was trying to block it from my memory.
I would probably prefer beheading and then burning rather than that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's true, though. Like, I don't understand why to do the same work twice, but yeah.
All of these executions and tortures in the Middle Ages were so messed up. So messed up.
I mean, at any point in history, I don't think it just true to say about the Middle Ages.
Yeah, but it got a little bit better. As in, I'm not saying it got better.
Come on.
What I'm saying is that now you cannot do that to people publicly.
Do you truly believe so? Publicly. Yeah, okay. Publicly. Like, that's a good word, publicly. Because I wanted to ask you if you truly believe that.
No, I don't believe that the people wouldn't do that, but publicly you cannot do that.
Yeah, okay.
And these things were public and allowed to do in the Middle Ages.
And even recorded for the history purposes. Yes,
and also it was used as entertainment as well in some cases, which is...
They didn't have Netflix at that point.
They didn't have Netflix, yes. During the trial, some of the numbers thrown around were staggering. One servant claimed that as many as 650 girls had died at Bathory's hands, supposedly seen in private book kept by Jakab Szilvási, her court official. The book was never produced, and Szilvási never confirmed it. The true number of victims remains uncertain. Confessions were inconsistent, and not all bodies were found, making the scale of her crimes nearly impossible to confirm. Some witnesses offered more concrete accounts. Benedek Bicserdi, the castellan at Castle Sárvár, said he knew of at least 175 deaths, a lot less than 650 there, but admitted he didn't know the cause of each and he wasn't allowed into Bathory's private chambers unless summoned.
And again, how does he know the specific number? Was he just like counting, like, okay, today,
Well, he was
22?
a castellan, and the castellans, they're basically, they keep the paper, they used to keep the papers of who's born, who's died, what's happening, what they spend money on.
But then why, at least, like, if he was the basically the record keeper, like, why he didn't produce the specific number?
Because he wasn't allowed in her private chamber, so he's saying there might be more,
okay.
but he was not witnessing it. And if you were a murderer, you wouldn't put it in the books that, you know, these people I just murdered.
Imagine if she was just an introvert and like, yeah, that was just used against her. Like the woman just wanted to be in her chamber by herself, uninterrupted.
I don't know, like, we'll see. Another castellan, Balthazar Pobi, testified that the number of victims at Sárvár alone could be over 200, possibly approaching 300, and that only counted one of her estates. Her other castles, including Castle Kerestur and Notorious Chaite, were not included. So everyone says a different number.
Yeah.
And as we know, she had, so to speak, hospitals on her estate where obviously a lot of people would die. And I do believe that she was cruel to some of her servants. That's absolutely believable.
Cruel and a murder are two different things.
Yes, there might have been that she killed a few just by beating them.
But you don't think she was actually this kind of sadist?
I don't think she would have killed that many people.
I honestly don't think so too, to be honest, because like first of all, the whole thing seems really shaky and like too many basically what's the word for it? Not alternative motivation, but
Alternative.
Yes, alternative motives. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. And too many alternative motives for her death and imprisonment.
And execution as well.
Exactly. And I don't know, like generally, like she seemed to have been a smart woman, right? So I don't think she would have risked it like to the level where she would torture and kill like noble women. You get me? Like especially in those numbers, you know, because I don't know, like just with peasants, that would be a maybe, but I don't think, you know, that holds any water in this case.
Maybe. I honestly don't know. Elizabeth Bathory spent her final years confined to Chaita Castle, though not as strictly as many imagined. George Thurzo reported that she was locked in a bricked room, yet documents from a visit by priests in July 1614 show she could move freely through the castle, more like house arrest than prison. Before her confinement, she had arranged her will in September 1610, leaving all her estate and possessions to her children, and by the end of that year, she had formally distributed her lands to ensure her family retained their wealth. On the evening of 20th of August 1614, she told her bodyguard her hands felt cold. He dismissed it, and she went to bed, never to wake again. Elizabeth died quietly at 54. She was buried on 25th of November 1614 in the church of Chaita, but villagers protested having her in their cemetery. Her remains were moved to her birth home at Eched, interred in the Bathory family crypt. Today, her exact resting place is unknown, believed to be somewhere deep within the castle grounds, with no markers to mark the spot. Yeah, that's it. That's her. So she died at age 54.
Also, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but isn't it suspicious that she died right after she just basically finished up her will?
Oh, it's not after. It was 4 years after.
Wait, yeah, 4 years after. For some reason, yeah, I just looked at the priest thing and I thought it was the same year. Okay, nothing suspicious there. Why do you think they let her be on house arrest if they believed that she committed all of those horrors?
So I think it's because of Jörg Thurzo, who was not going to execute her, and he kind of treated her as a human being, but
Do you think so? Do you believe
yeah,
so?
I do believe so, but I think what happened, because he wanted to climb the ladder, he would give these testimonies that he find these girls. Maybe he did find some girls. You never know. Maybe he did. Again, there might have been beaten up. But I think in the down low, he wanted to be in a good relationship with her family as well.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I think he was just trying to, trade lightly and keep the balance because her family still held a lot of power. And, as much as the king is powerful, kings, come and go, especially since you spoke about the political situation, that it could really change at any point.
That's it. He had his own agenda, I think, but at the same time tried to keep everyone happy. So
Yeah,
this is
I
why.
wouldn't want to be him.
No, he definitely had a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure on him. But at the same time, he wanted to be an important person as well.
Also, interesting points about Hungarians' political history. I'm surprised that the king didn't have the power to just, overrule the decision of this inspector, I guess we can call him. Because in a lot of places, kings were all powerful.
Yes, but also I think because her nephew, he was ruling in Transylvania, Gábor Bathory, and pushing against Habsburg control. This is why it's probably the king couldn't overrule anything. So it was not just the king and the Habsburgs, but also the Ottomans were coming with a huge army, and this nephew was supported by the Ottomans.
He could really use it as a reason to basically just flip the whole thing.
I think it has a lot to do with the politics, this whole case. Religion, maybe as well, but politics mainly. Also, that the
money.
country was torn apart by war and everyone wanted a piece of land, a piece of ruling, and she was in the way, and she was a woman.
I think that didn't help.
Yes. I don't know if she committed those crimes. Honestly, there is no evidence against her that would rule out anything, or evidence that she didn't do it.
I mean, my opinion is just highly doubtful, Again, like you said, we weren't there. It's hard to claim for sure, but there are too many reasons for them, to want her dead or imprisoned. So, yeah, I don't think it actually happened the way they say it happened.
Do you think if she was a man, would have happened? Would the same thing happen?
I think maybe. I think yes, because in this case, it didn't seem to be motivated by the gender, or at least not mostly. Like you said, the political situation was just too complicated, and people did much worse, to people who are much more powerful, regardless of gender, to keep even less of the power. And we're not even talking about the king of the whole country. So I don't think it would have mattered, honestly. Yeah, I don't think it really, yeah.
Hypothetically,
I'm just repeating myself.
say she was innocent and she was a man, I think the king and all of these people who were against her, they would have searched her out as an ally rather than trying to remove her.
Okay, in that regard, yes, possibly. Or they maybe were more hesitant to investigate in such, I would say, invasive manner.
Yes, probably.
But I don't think, if actually the investigation was already at play, it would have mattered.
Yeah, it's a weird case. It's such a weird case, so fascinating. And I say that a lot that, I wish I could go back in time and see what happened. And this is one of those cases that if I did have a time machine, I would definitely visit and see if all of this was true.
I hope you would be invisible because, if they thought that you were one of the girls, one of the peasants.
Yes. Yeah. Or have something like an armor.
Exactly. Because otherwise, maybe we still wouldn't have known.
Exactly. It's interesting, though, to think about these things. And it's interesting how, for hundreds of years, people were making up all of these legends that she's bathing in blood to keep herself young, and all of these films and
This is a
books
very common
were.
one. She's not the only one they spoke about this, this whole bathing in blood kind of thing. Like it just repeats itself over and over again.
I'd never heard that before besides her. But yeah, because I think there are some films and books that is about her, but the name was changed. Maybe we are talking about the same thing. But she did inspire films, plays, operas, television shows, video games.
Never heard about her.
You might have heard it, just again, not with the same name.
I'm actually Googling if there were others, because I definitely have heard of them. Which noble ladies were accused of bathing in blood
Your
of
Google history is going to be really weird.
actually I'm using ChatGPT. Let me do it in private mode. Bathing blood to keep themselves young. I wrote noble ladies, and it's giving me none of the women who won a Nobel Prize were ever accused of that.
Well, that's good to know, at least.
I meant noble women, not Nobel Prize winners. Actually, the first one that comes on top is Elizabeth Bathory. It's true.
There you go.
Are there more? Yes. But they say that she's the most credible accused. I don't know, how do you call a person who's being accused?
Accused person.
I don't know, maybe her accusation is the most credible.
Just to clarify, neither of us, our first language is not English. So
and you really caught us on a bad day. It's been a really, really long day. I'm barely moving my mouth.
I can't remember words, neither in Hungarian, neither in English. Either way, it's a super interesting case, I think, and hopefully all of you enjoyed the story of Elizabeth Bathory. Let us know in the comments what you think of it. My name is Reika, and this is my friend Roderick. And in the next episode, we are going to talk about another Hungarian who was a serial killer, but it was in the last century.
It makes me question your country even more.
Small country, nobody hears about them, but they do exist. This one is called, her name was Piroska Jancsó Ladányi, and she's a woman as well.
And another woman.
But she is definitely was not a good person.
You know what they say, still waters run deep, and I think Hungary is a very interesting country to explore.
I mean, you are from the Ukraine. Maybe you can find some serial killers from there as well.
That would be very interesting digging into my own country. But you know what? I'll find some time.
I mean, most podcasts, and we will cover famous cases like Ted Bundy, I think, but they are widely discussed by other channels, I think. So maybe people would be interested in
something more niche.
Something more niche. So anything else you would like to add before we say goodbye?
Honestly, no. I was trying to think of something clever or something like this, but the brain is not braining anymore.
Not braining. Okay, that's fine. I think it's time to go to bed and think about...
Absolutely. And have dinner first.
And have dinner.
Enjoy the rest of your day in the next episode.
Yes, until the next episode. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
Absolutely, otherwise we'll be sad.
Yes, for more intriguing stories like this one.